button. You gotta love that like robot voice that is attached to Zoom. Um, all right. First of all, we'll do a basic check-in. How's everybody doing this week? Surviving? Thriving? Is anybody thriving this week? Probably not this week. It's too cold to thrive. I think survive is all we can ask for when it's like 10 degrees outside. Um, what did you guys think of Javen's presentation? I know it like started a little bit late and then went a little bit long. Um, I personally think that whenever these lectures go long, that it's actually a good sign. It usually means that it's somebody that's super excited about what they're talking about. It's like you when you're so excited about the work that you make and what you do, it's like you can't help but nerd out for a little minute. Um, it's like the things you love are really easy to talk about, and I think it really kind of shows when Javen talks about a lot of his projects or the reasoning behind his projects. So, what did you guys think? Come on now, don't be shy.
I mean, it looks like he did a lot of different things. Like he
Yes.
tried a lot, like of different things he was interested in. So I really like that.
Yeah, I especially like his ability to admit when he's bored. Um, I think he kind of talks really frankly about the transition from sort of designing and getting a degree in an academic setting, and then kind of the stark contrast of like when you actually have to go and get a 9 to 5 job. Especially if you're one of those people that like gets bored very easily. I think there's a lot of people that can kind of relate to that. Um, Especially, I mean, I don't know about you guys nowadays. It's like I can't help but be bored most of the time. Um, and I think a large part of that is that, like, for work, we're on the computer, for school, we're on the computer, for socializing, we're on the computer. It's like everything looks the same. There aren't like the clear designations or boundaries that like we have in like the normal world. Um, so everything starts to feel like work. Um, but specifically, I do think it can be kind of jarring when you move into um, the workforce from being in academia so long. So I was glad that he kind of like spoke to that transition a little bit. And also sort of, he's a great example of, if you go after what you're passionate about and you maintain your interests, that you never know what's going to come of it. You know, he 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 continued to work with people. He continued to follow his passions, even outside of having a 9 to 5 job, and that actually has led to him getting opportunities that he never even would have thought of. Now that is his work. Is going after those projects. Like he's being paid to do the things that he's interested in. Because I think a lot of the time, we just focus on having a traditional job when we get out of school. But what you don't realize is that like sometimes you can literally uh, find a gap in the market and then create your own niche, and then that becomes your job. So I always think it's great to hear from people that have essentially created their own workforce through some kind of type of like innovative idea. Um, what else? What do you guys think? Reactions? Questions? I don't, I'm not the expert on his work, but I at least am a little bit familiar, at least with the Painted Black mural project. Which if you spent any amount of time in St. Louis last year, kind of driving around, you probably saw a vast majority of those murals installed in St. Louis because they were everywhere. I think around like April and May, they were kind of all over downtown Del Mar. I think there are even some on Grand. A little bit of everything. Jacob, you had some really great comments during the chat. What'd you think of David?
I would just say it was impressive how much of his own work he turned into legitimate business.
Mm-hmm.
Like he just had all these projects he was interested in and he built them up himself, and then they eventually came to fruition as actual legitimate work outside of his own creation.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, too, it's this idea that like a lot of those projects, you know, he came up with the initial ideas, but I think I really respect the fact that he's willing to acknowledge that like he didn't do it alone, and that a lot of those projects were socially based projects. So he was working within communities with groups of people. Because I don't think, you know, when you guys are making just in an academic setting, I don't think we work collaboratively all that much, or, you know, we aren't doing social justice projects, especially not now during the pandemic. You know, so it's, you almost feel like you're creating in a vacuum. And I think it's important to kind of recognize that there are other pathways, and they can be, you know, incredibly rewarding financially, but they can also just be rewarding to work with other people. It's, you're able to like broaden your own perspective of what is possible. And I think that's been one of the kind of major selling points, and why he's been so successful, is that like he's not sitting there going like, I am doing this alone. He's willing to seek out the people that know how to do the augmented reality stuff. He's willing to ask who knows how to do this, who knows how to do this. And then, you know, like all of that sort of leads to the projects, you know, taking flight. Because there's something I think that is really impressive when you can admit when you don't know how to do something and you can ask somebody else who does. And then that does nothing but just expand your circle of creative people and problem solvers. And I think he's starting to get a really wide circle of creative people around him, that are just, you know, there to support him, give him advice, and just lift him up. Because a large part of the arts is actually just who you know. And so the more people you know, the more people that you talk to, communicate with, become friends with, you never know what that's going to lead to. That could be your next opportunity. That could be your next paycheck. So yeah, I think that's an excellent point, Jacob. All right, how'd you guys do with your homework this week? How'd you guys do with your failure resumes? Does everybody have theirs?
I thought it was funny because like so many times when I mess something up, it like will mess with me like the whole day. And I mean, there's obviously been a lot of times I've messed up stuff, but when I was trying to think of the list, it was kind of hard for me to pinpoint like exactly which things I failed, you know?
Mm-hmm. So that experience of trying to actually make the list was difficult?
Yeah, I feel like I went kind of generic with some, and then the only things I could remember super specific were things that have been like from within the past year, or
Okay.
things that like really kind of brought me down. But again, it was mostly stuff from like senior year of high school to now, because it was just so hard to remember.
Mm-hmm. So the things within your sort of immediate time frame are obviously easier to remember. Well, I do think that there's, you know, there's patterns too that probably emerge, which potentially might have led to the more like generic bullet points on the resume. I know I was kind of, you know, I didn't create a document like you guys did, but I did do the exercise, and I was trying to think of the things. And I had a lot of generalized ones too, because I think, you know, at least from a creative standpoint, a lot of my failings happen repetitively over and over again. So who else? What do we got? What things emerged?
I feel like for me, whenever I thought of like failures, a lot of it was like kind of like the same thing happening again, just in like a different part of my life. Like I guess maybe me not like standing up for myself in like multiple points, and then I just kind of like had like a vague statement just representing like random things, but they all kind of had like the same similar end result,
Okay.
or made me feel like the same way.
Okay. I'm going to ask that you guys submit those to me either via the discussion board, or if you don't feel comfortable sharing it in a public forum, you can also email it to me. Just so I can get a general sense. It helps me get to know you guys better, and therefore I can better support you throughout the semester. Because again, we're trying to learn from the people that are speaking to us in this lecture series, sort of mining their experience and learning from their mistakes, but also their successes as well. So yeah, if I sort of see maybe like, if you guys open the window for me into your brains, I can sort of better serve you this semester a little bit, or at least try to. So if you don't mind, try to get that posted before the weekend is up, or email it to me, which you guys all have my email. How did you guys feel writing all that stuff down, like in a row, or even just like thinking about it as an assignment? Because I've never given this assignment before, so I'm interested to see what your initial responses are.
Well, not that it was a bad idea to do it. It just made me kind of feel bad. So
Okay.
even though I've learned through those like failures, I think I'm still working through them. Like I feel
Okay.
like there's still like shame attached to some of them,
Yeah.
which is good because it kind of brought out like, oh, I probably need to think about that a little more, you know? So I made like a fun PowerPoint to like distract myself from like typing the things. So
Great. Yeah, I was wondering what like forms these would take. So PowerPoint, I think, is a great one. That's you're unpacking the shame, right? So you're still working on it. You're unpacking maybe some of the feelings attached to those like failures. That PowerPoint might be like an excellent, great start to like your TED Talk. You know what I mean? Like your artist talk might actually come out of that PowerPoint. But it's also why I gave you guys those videos to watch. You know, I know it's kind of a weird experience to think about and or to try to list all of the failures in a row, right? That already was like a steep hill to climb. But one of the reasons why I did that is because I wanted you guys to be able to go through that experience, but also ask yourself, is it shame or is it guilt? And try to figure out how to shift it from shame to guilt, you know, because shame is I am bad, I am a failure. Guilt is I failed at something. But I can try it again. Because I want to try to have a segue away from a shame mindset and into a guilt mindset, because if with guilt you can become resilient, guilt you can conquer. Shame is a lot harder, and shame has sort of like lasting results that potentially keep us from finding success. It's the thing that holds you back, or it engineers you to stay small, and you don't want to stay small. You know, you want to go after all of the things that you didn't even think that you were capable of. So yeah, I think it's natural that you haven't worked through all of those things yet. I wouldn't expect you to. Like, it's going to take our whole life to work through those things. Let's see. Jacob says, I heard someone say, you're not someone who fails at things, you're someone who had failed at things. Yeah. So yeah, acknowledging that it was, perhaps a period in time and not necessarily a static way of being. Um, like you have experienced failure, but that isn't necessarily who you are now. But you also have to consider, like, I think an excellent secondary sort of step to this process is take that list of all of the things that you created, this past week, and then item by item, uh, attach to it something that you learned from that specific situation. I think that's a wonderful way to sort of move past dwelling in shame and realizing how resilient you guys are. Because I guarantee there's not a single bullet point on those lists that you can't think of at least one thing that you learned from that scenario. Or at least in the future, we'll be able to attach like a lesson learned. You might not be at that point yet, or you might not have the clarity to see that yet, but it's still there. Who else? Who else did their resume of failure and had some findings for me?
When I did mine, I kind of did mine like just like a sketchbook page, just because I didn't really, I don't know, like when you first said it, I thought of just doing a sketchbook page instead of like typing it out or like writing like a list and not really like doing something with it. But like reading through it, I'm like very hard on myself for no reason. And I think a lot of these failures might not actually be failures, because like I'm like, I think I'm just being too hard on myself. And that's probably like half of these, honestly.
Well, and it's also like, yeah, so if you do choose to like put it in the discussion, the group discussion, like, are your classmates going to agree with you? Are they gonna like look at those
Yeah.
things and just be like, oh my gosh, Monica, you're insane? Like, what do you mean that's a failure? That was my favorite thing. Yeah, I think we have a tendency to be kinder to our friends and to, the people that we care about, but we don't approach ourselves with we don't give ourselves any slack or any leeway or any gratitude. We don't give ourselves credit for the things that we do accomplish each day. I think so. You guys watched the video, the Elizabeth Gilbert video and the Brene Brown video. I can't remember if it was in the one that you guys watched. She has 2 TED Talks, Brene Brown does. But in one of them, she talks about the culture of scarcity, which is the idea that like literally just in sort of Western society, we are working within the framework of, we are overworked, we're underpaid, there's never enough time, there's never enough money, there's never enough anything. And so it's this entire culture of scarcity, of there not being enough. And we then place a lot of those rules and a lot of that mindset on ourselves. And it's what I think leads to us being way too harsh, Monica, is that like we then take the societal scarcity and then we place it on ourselves because we're trying to succeed in that society. So we're constantly just being like, I'm not working hard enough, I didn't do enough, this isn't good enough. Like that word enough gets sort of like stuck in our brain when in actuality, a lot of people take comfort in an exercise of literally making lists or writing everything down. So it's beneficial if you ever feel like you're not doing enough to write down all of the things that you did do in a single day. Because you then start to realize that you're actually much more effective as a human being than you think you are. Especially for you guys that are taking classes right now. I can't even you know, I'm teaching 3 classes, but all of you guys are typically taking 5. So you guys have to give yourself way more credit than you even know, because you're juggling way more than I think, honestly, in some circumstances, like a lot of other people in the world could juggle. You guys are already doing that. So what'd you guys think about those videos? I know they didn't particularly pertain to the visual arts, but I personally find inspiration and like to listen to creative people of all walks of life, including writers, you know, writers, researchers, all that kind of stuff. So I thought it was interesting how they kind of took some of these ideas and broke down more broadly what it is to be creative. What'd you guys think?
I really like them. You know, I feel like I learned a lot of like little fun facts in them. Like, was it the first video that like it went from, I don't know, like the Olay thing was very interesting to me. That has nothing to really do with like the main topic, but I just thought that was interesting. But
Oh, that Olay came from Allah.
yeah, I thought that was really interesting. And the fact that the thing with the geniuses, and that we like a lot of people see artists as like, oh, like they get, you know, just putting a lot of pressure on artists, and like, oh, that's not their best work, like it's never going to get better from there type of thing. It's really interesting to think of, like, you know, maybe that all of that doesn't come from me type of thing. So like when you're
No.
making art, like, you know, like
Yeah.
take pressure off yourself, you know?
Yeah. Well, and it's like every single art history class you ever read about, they're just like, okay, here's all the titans of art history, you know,
Yeah.
and they make it seem like to succeed in art that you have to be this mythical being
Mm-hmm.
that like has some gift and was the first person or the only person to ever have that idea ever. When in actuality, the more accurate statement, and I think this comes up a lot, especially now that we're sort of revisiting how we construct art history, and we're addressing some of the uh, inadequacies and inequity that is in art history, which is that like typically we've only paid attention to white male artists, and those are the ones that we read about and write about in our art history books. And now we're kind of like taking a second look and being like, oh no, actually there were a lot of women that were doing very similar things, or there were a lot of people of color, or there were a lot of like non-Western artists that were already exploring those things way before that guy did. You know, so I think we're starting to scratch the surface of that. But I think in that retelling of, or that rewriting or reinvestigation of art history, we're also learning that like these white male artists are not mythical beings. More than one person can have a similar idea. More than one person can work with certain materials or certain media. It's just we propped up this idea that these were creative geniuses. You know, and I think we're starting to pick that apart now. Like, you know, she talked about it wasn't always like that. You know, the Romans and the Greeks attributed creativity as being like this divine creature that would come visit artists, and sort of like it, the pressure was off. Like if your work wasn't any good, it was okay. Like it wasn't your fault. It was like your little demon was like, you know, kicking his feet up that day and like didn't help. And I think I think there's something to that, and I think that's one of the reasons why I really like how she talks about that. Basically, it's about taking the pressure off being creative. You guys have already heard me a couple of times this semester about not judging yourself. I always use the phrase, "That's not your job." And towards the end of hers, she talks about when she was working on her book, and she's like just saying aloud, she was like, I showed up for my part of the job. Like I showed up, I did my part of the job, I sat at the typewriter and I worked on the book. Like, if this doesn't work out, it's not because I didn't show up. So I think there's something to that, about recognizing that sometimes the muse will show up in the studio, and sometimes you show up and you wait on the muse. But really, the largest part is that you just have to show up. I think it's interesting when we opened up the question for Javen's talk, one of the first questions that was asked is like how do you counteract burnout, which I think is a question that a lot of us are trying to answer for ourselves. What ways have you guys come up with thus far that help you guys handle that situation? And there's no right or wrong way to handle it, and sometimes you don't handle it, which is fine. Which actually, case in point, I might send you guys a get out of jail free card to use at any point during the semester, which in effect will essentially just, I'll grab it and I'll email it to you guys this weekend, but it will essentially be a get out of jail free card, which means that you can send it to me at any point during the semester, and then I won't hold it against you. Does that sound like a good plan? Okay, yeah, you guys are gonna get a freebie, because I think we all need one. I will also say that if I ever need to use it, I will send it to you guys, because this is a two-way street. But yeah, I mean, we're in February. I don't know if you know that, but we're in February already, which means that we're a month away from already being a year into this maddening worldwide experiment that is a global pandemic. So I would like to say that we're developing effective coping mechanisms, but I don't actually know if that's true. How do you guys feel? Do you feel like it's getting easier, or do you feel like it's just dragging on and compounding in a way?
It's dragging on. Every day feels like 1,000 hours.
How do we make it better?
I feel like in a way I'm getting used to some parts of it, but I don't like that I'm getting used to it. Like, I feel like, especially, our country and even this continent, people are like, we're so reliant on, I could get into a whole thing, but a capitalist society, we have to go to work. Therefore, we've adapted to just wearing masks in public instead of focusing on, staying at home and ending the pandemic. We've just kind of adapted.
Yeah. I think I agree totally, because it's that maddening situation that if everyone collectively just stayed home for the 2 weeks, scientifically they were saying it'd be good. So yeah, I think a large part of it is like you said, the Western capitalists, they need to make money. They can't sacrifice money, and so they keep the systems open. What else?
I saw someone on Twitter say something that was 2020 taught me that things don't get better. And that's not true, but that's what it feels like at this point, and it's really exhausting.
Yeah.
At the beginning of the pandemic, I was very optimistic. I was chilling. I was fine. It was now I have all this time to make art and be who I want to be and blah blah blah. But then now it sucks all the time. And
Mhm.
like it's just like mental health
Yeah.
downwards. And I needed to get better, but it just doesn't feel like it.
What's what are the things that make it feel slightly better,
I
if
mean,
anything?
I still have like little routines and whatever. It's just like I like to look forward to things
Yeah.
and like know what it's gonna look like. And there's just some things that at this point I don't know if it's ever going to be the same, which I don't know.
Yeah.
It's but it sucks.
I think everything's gonna look pretty different for a while. Um, which is one of the reasons. I mean, Jade, you were in art forum last semester, so you're familiar with some of my like my my lectures on like reframing perspective, um, or at least trying to approach how we think about the situations
Yeah,
differently.
that's a lot of what I've had to do.
But it's like easier said than done. It's like I think
Yeah.
you should give yourself credit for the fact that you're trying, um, because there are going to be some days where it's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
Like there's going to be some days where you're just going to be like, no, that's garbage. The world's garbage. Everything is trash, and that's fine too. Um, we just got to try to not have too many of those in a row, or pinpoint what the garbage thing is, and then what are ways that we can fix it. I think it was interesting. Javen, he thinks about the stuff that is messed up in the world, and then he tries to design his way around it, which maybe is a good exercise, because it keeps the creative juices flowing. But then it requires us not to take a passive role. And so in areas or in times of uncertainty, it allows us to feel like we have agency, even when maybe we don't have as much agency as we want. But we can try to design a future where we have some agency. And then, I mean, his started as like random doodles on his computer. And then all of a sudden, he's having people reach out to him, and Lutopia is becoming an actual project that is like opening up into a reality. And it just started as like a weird doodle project for his Instagram page. So yeah, I mean, I know it's hard to wake up and to even want to do anything. And I'm speaking from my edge of the experience, because half of the time I wake up and I'm just like, no, shut it down. But I guess on the good days, recognizing that it's a good day, and then, trying something. I think I asked you guys that question last week. How many things did you try? So on the good days, ask yourself that question. And on the bad days, give yourself a break. Like, don't shame yourself for not getting anything done that day, because as we've heard, shame is not a good thing. You guys are not non-productive people. You guys are students who are getting an education during a global pandemic, which is very hard to do. And so we don't expect you guys to be at like 110% all the time. I'm good if you guys show up at a solid 60. It's like, that's all I want. The fact that you guys have your cameras on is like miracle. Like, good on you. I appreciate it. It means that I don't have to like speak into the void. What else? What do you guys think about all of the guilt shame construct conversation? I know, Monica, you were saying that you're hard on yourself. Do you think recognizing the definitions of those two words is going to be beneficial in the future?
Yeah, because I don't know if I don't think I have shame. I just think I feel guilty for a lot of things for no reason. I feel like I have to be like a person that like makes sure that everyone's fine and that I'm also not making anyone upset, and but it's like like everyone has their own responsibilities, so it's like I have the guilt for that, which I shouldn't.
Mhm.
So it's just like realizing like, oh, like I have to stop feeling guilty all the time. So it does help knowing the difference
Yeah.
pretty much, I think. Yeah.
Um, what do you think about the idea of like not holding ourselves solely 100% responsible for our creative output? Is that easier said than done? Like letting go of this idea that we are the divine vehicle, like to the creative gods. Because like I for some reason it's interesting because I think we beat ourselves up a lot when we're making stuff, but and we try to judge it. We try to be the critics of our own work. Um, but I think that process of doing all of that inhibits us creatives, like creating things anyways. Um, so what about, yeah, what about like it not being, I specifically wrote down, you are not the vessel of the divine. Like that's like kind of a giant like act of hubris to even possibly think that like everything that we have to say A needs to be said, or B is like going to be the most important thing that is ever said in the history of mankind. Like I think we put way too much pressure on ourselves to like make art that is important. Like why is it not okay to just make art that is dumb, or make art that is funny, like, or make art, maybe the artwork doesn't have to reach a global audience, but maybe the artwork can literally be to just make one person smile. Like why is that, why do we place such heavy, I guess, weight on our every single action?
I don't know if this is an unpopular opinion, but like I feel like during critiques in certain classes, like I can make something just for fun for myself, but everyone will try to read into it and make it super serious and make it some prolific thing, or like the professor will like kind of like not like it because it's just simple or something. And I feel like that perpetuates my need to like make something prolific and like really good and great and like just stuff like that. So I don't know. I think it's perpetuated by people who think the same way. Did that make sense? I don't know.
Yeah, so it's part of like how we talk about art.
Yeah.
It's like because we get, me being the professor, we give assignments where we're like, okay, have your artist statement ready, like let us know what your concept is, what are your influences. It's like we have you guys do all of the attached research work, to sort of explain yourselves, when oftentimes that's not where creativity comes from. It comes from like, it comes from you drawing cat dog since you were 5, or like having like my student in sculpture 1 this semester, she made a wooden egg, and it was like a wooden egg, like a fried egg, kind of like a cartoony looking one, and then like a fork and a knife out of wood. And she started telling me, she was like, you didn't really give us a prompt, so I just went with the thing that I always doodle in my sketchbook all the time, which is an egg. And I was just like, that's fascinating. I was like, I don't know a whole lot of people where like their starting point is egg. But that's something that is very unique to that person. So I kind of agree with you, is like, in academia, yes, we want to make sure that you guys are internalizing all of the principles and elements of design, and through critique is one of the ways that we are able to basically Socratically, through discussion, identify that you guys are internalizing that information. But when you get out of academia, nobody's going to ask you any of those questions, or it's going to be really rare. And also, you're going to be able to answer questions with, well, I just did that because I was obsessed with this particular shade of green, and that was my jumping off point. Like, you get to say stuff like that when you get out. So I don't want you to get discouraged, because I myself am guilty of trying to read too much into student work, but also like read too much into that was one of the biggest things that I struggled with when I graduated. And then I went, because I'm a masochist, and I did a whole other 3 years of school immediately afterwards. I was like potentially way too young to continue going to school for that long. But one of the best things that ever happened to me was I graduated, and then I stopped trying to read too much into my impulses. All of the artwork I make now, I usually don't derive meaning from it until I've already made it. Like, I don't know what it means until it's already out there in the world. I just know that I had to make it. So I think if you guys start to tap into that now, and also like push back at your professors, push back at them. If they ask you a question and you don't know the answer to it, like, don't bullshit them. Like, what would happen if you literally are approached with a question and critique, and you actually said, well, I don't really know how to answer that question at this time. And that's your answer. Like, well, and you can also follow that up with, and that's okay. And then see what the reaction is, because I think a lot of the time we're so afraid to say the words "I don't know," because we think that people will judge us, or project some level of like I don't know, make a judgment call about our education. But this is all, art is subjective. So often, and it's a journey, and we literally call in the teaching field, we call our artistic practice our research. So I mean, how often have you guys written a research paper in college, and from day one you knew the answer to everything? Literally never. Research takes time. So when approaching creative output, that is your research. You're not going to have the answer in every single critique. You guys see critiques as being the end deadline of when you turn something in and it's 100% done, but oftentimes it's not done. That possibly might actually be a midpoint for you, and it's okay. You can always go cycle back and then make the changes that you want to change. Like, critique is supposed to be you getting feedback, and then in an ideal scenario you continue to work, and perhaps the feedback was constructive and it helps move you forward. But you can also just choose to set that feedback aside, and maybe it doesn't apply to you. It could be a jacket that doesn't fit right. It doesn't mean you have to wear it. That's an excellent point. I think Critiques are good and bad, I think, creatively. It's you'd think in us like teaching art for however many years art has been taught that we would have mastered uh, the principles and the pedagogy around it, but we're still learning. Um, what are other responses or actions either to the readings or having gremlins in your studio, gremlins of shame to try to prevent you from making things?
I think I forgot which video it was in, but one of the videos the woman was talking about how she knew this poet, and like the poet said that when she was younger she would like be working like maybe like in the field or something, and like whenever she got an idea she would just like run home. I think that's so funny because I feel like there's a lot of random times where it's like 1 a.m. and I'm like, oh my God, like I feel like I need to paint like right now. Like I have to get up right now. But then I'm like, but it's 1 a.m. I don't want to start.
Yeah.
I feel like I get those urges so often, and a lot of times I actually ignore it because I'm like, I'm gonna mess up my sleep schedule and it's already messed up.
Well,
But
yeah.
yeah.
That's you creating healthy boundaries with your creative demon.
Yeah.
That's exactly what Tom Waits did.
Yeah.
He had the song in his head. He was in the car and he was like, "Excuse me, can you not see that I'm driving?" So I think it's actually really important to do that, to set boundaries, because I think setting boundaries for yourself helps you fight that scarcity mentality that we were talking about. It
Mhm.
helps you fight that because it you kind of like set your working hours, right? Which I think is really important nowadays because uh, we're doing everything from home. So when this first started, I swear to God, I was answering emails, grading things, and working on like creating assignments for all of my classes 24 hours a day. Like I didn't have a home life anymore. Like my work and my home were interchangeable. And so I didn't know how to set boundaries. But I think it's actually really important because otherwise the burnout gets so bad. Um, and I think you have to do that with your your creative practice as well. Because I think you need space to get away from what you're working on in order to like get new ideas, but also problem solve. Like you're not going to problem solve if you have your nose pressed up against whatever you're working on constantly. You have to be able to take a step back to see the big picture, to see how everything is coming together. And you can't do that, if you stay chained to the project like all the time. Um, I have to always schedule it in when I'm working on stuff because I get real intense and I have a tendency to put myself under deadlines that are uh, way too short and unfeasible, but I try to make the impossible happen because I'm a crazy person. Um, so I try to tell myself, like, you don't have time to take a break. Yes, you do. You always have time to take a break. Like, first of all, like, don't be a narcissist. Like, if you take a 10-minute break, like, the end result is not going to be like that much less impressive. Like 10 minutes of your time is not going to like turn you into Michelangelo. So like you can afford to eat a sandwich and remember to eat while you're having your day. So I think setting the boundaries is really important, but it also is it's distancing yourself from that idea of creative output being solely on you. I think however you want to phrase it, whether it's fairies, whether it's, you know, Greek demons that live in your studio walls, be it like, you know, the fickle muse that sometimes shows up or sometimes doesn't, whatever you want to call it. Some of us have, you know, everybody's got bad days and everybody's got good days. And I don't think you should shame or guilt yourself on the days where it's just not happening. That's your mind and your body's way of saying like, hey, it's time to take a break.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
I was just reminded of this artist that I like. Well, musical artist. So I don't know how to pronounce it. If it's Dan Deacon or if it's something.
Oh,
else.
Dan Deacon.
Yeah, Deacon. Sorry. Yeah, his like it was on an Instagram post a while ago, but he talked about his newest album, Mystic Familiar, and it's about the concept of having like a mystic familiar like person in your head that will give you support. So like instead of yourself telling you you're doing a good job, you have this other entity in your head that's like you're doing great.
I love that.
I
Mystic
saved that a long
Familiar.
time ago. I can't believe I just thought about that. But yeah, I love that too.
Ooh, that's my favorite term I think that we've come across to describe this thing. Mystic Familiar.
Mhm.
Thank you for that.
Mhm.
That's I needed the right term to call what I want you guys to do for homework. Which is I want you to draw what the muse is. I want you to draw what the demon is. I want you to personify and illustrate what the mystic familiar is. And you're going to do that because I want you to have it to where you can put it in your studio. And so on the days when you show up, at least your rendering of the mystic familiar will already be in your studio. So if you're having one of those days where you don't know if it's shown up or not, you will at least have a drawing of it. And maybe in looking at that drawing, you can psychologically trick yourself into thinking that the real deal has also shown up. Or at least it's a little friend to post in your studio so that you don't feel like you're alone. And it could literally be anything. It's just a drawing. I have a personification of my gremlins, and I have them all over my house and all over my studio. But I kind of like having them because they're sort of they're physical manifestations of like my internal anxiety. And so when I see they're sculptural because you know it's me. So when I see those little guys, it kind of reminds me that like these are things that I can overcome because I specifically made them kind of small, and so like I'm able to put them in their place and rearrange them in space. So it allows me to control the gremlins, and I can put them wherever I want, or I can remove them from the space. But this is the gremlin. So yeah, I mean, do a personification of your mystic familiar. If you think that it'll be more successful of an exercise to create a gremlin, and you know, be able to control your gremlins in one fashion or another, or destroy them. We can always go back to the destruction if that helps. You can create your gremlins and you can smash them. Whatever you guys feel like would be a productive exercise, we will do that. I know that the failure resume potentially might have been a little bit hard to do, so now let's bring us back up, do something a little bit more creative, and then yeah, we'll see where we go from that. let's see. I may have a reading for you guys to discuss next week. I don't know. I haven't decided yet. We might just take it easy. Did you guys like the videos in terms of homework? Is that easier to do, harder to do? More entertaining at least?
I like TED Talks. for
I
sure.
like TED Talks too. I will go down like an extreme rabbit hole where I just let YouTube play me a full playlist of things. So nice. All right. Okay. So I'll keep that open as an option for things that can act as prompts for our discussions in the week. Because again, like I said, we're almost a year in. So also, I get to build what this course is. And so I like to include y'all's feedback and give you guys what you actually want and need more of. So, all right. So to be clear, homework is create a mystic, familiar, and or a gremlin. Try to have fun with it. It's supposed to be fun. And yeah, does anybody have any questions? Everybody doing good? All right. I don't off the top of my head know who the speaker is for next week, but I always send you guys the links. Again, we will be meeting next Friday at noon for the speaker and then having a discussion afterwards. Make sure you guys remember to either post your failure resumes in the discussion board and or send it to me. That way you get full credit for the assignment. Try to do it before end of day Sunday. I mean, honestly, I would just do it now just so you don't forget. If you're anything like me, you will forget. And then you'll be like Monica at 1 o'clock in the morning and you'll be like, huzzah, I forgot. So yeah, try to get that done. And then, yeah, I mean, I think almost everybody's been doing pretty good. You guys are showing up, which is the main component of passing this class. So I want to commend you guys for showing up every week, because that in and of itself is hard enough. All right, Jade, look alive. All right. Well, I hope you guys have a good weekend. Try to schedule in some rest. Schedule in some sleep. And I will see you guys next Friday. All right? All right. Peace be with you. Bye.
Thanks. Have a good one.